Hey, everybody. Welcome to Making Connections. It's your girl, Allie. I hope everybody's having an amazing day. We know that today is 9/11, something that happened major that changed all our lives, something we'll never forget. So, we'll be talking about that throughout the show, but definitely wanted to, mention that, sending prayers out to all those that are still feeling the effects. But excited to be here with you guys today. Excited to welcome back Roberta Wilson. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's so nice to be back here with you.
Yes, it's always fun to be with her. I mean, listen, this lady is a wealth of information and just helps you, think about things in a different way, because sometimes when you're going through something, all you know is what you're going through. So sometimes, we need that outside voice to help us, be able to put things in perspective and to remind us that life is worth living, right, Roberta?
Absolutely. That is correct. And no better day to remember that than on 9/11.
Absolutely. So I know you've been here before, but just in case it's the first time, our audience has seen you, just want to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, happy to do that. So, I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor in the state of North Carolina, and I practice here in Charlotte, and then I have an office in Gaston County in Belmont. And I am a longtime Charlotte Metro resident and have worked here not only as a psychotherapist, but also as a journalist for a long time at the Shelby Star and at the Charlotte Observer, Hickory Daily Records. I've been at pretty much every small newspaper and major newspaper in the region. And then I taught for a while in Lincoln County and also in Cleveland County. So I went
Yeah.
to school at Gardner Webb. So I'm a local girl.
I love it. I love it. You've been in the different communities in the different areas. So that I think that's what's so cool because people who've been in the community, people who have experienced the people and experienced what they've been through and been able to walk with them through it, they have a real story. You have a real experience that you're sharing with our audience today.
I do. And unfortunately, I saw it as a teacher and I saw it as a journalist. And now I certainly see it as a psychotherapist who specializes in trauma. That there are a lot of people out there suffering and not just on 9/11.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, tell me what a psychotherapist is.
Therapist goes by many names. It could be a therapist or a counselor. Some people even call themselves life coaches. But the difference between some of those people and a person who actually has a license is that if you have a license in the state of North Carolina as either a psychologist or a marriage and family therapist or as a licensed clinical mental health counselor, that means you have to have graduated from a graduate school with at least 60 hours in a field specific to psychology so that you know research based methods to help people recover from mental illness, psychological trauma, family difficulties, a whole host of things. And so we have an actual education and we have to have graduated from grad school. We have to have completed several national tests in order to become licensed. And then also we have to be licensed in the state of North Carolina, which to be fully licensed means that you have had 3,000 or more supervised hours. And then the North Carolina Board of Licensed Professional Counselors or Clinical Mental Health Counselors or psychologists or licensed marriage and family therapists sees that you have done all the things and you've jumped through all the hoops so that now you're qualified to be able to serve the public.
Oh, wow. Well, that makes me feel even better. We got an expert with us, y'all. But still, I think what, drew me to you was that, you have the license, you've done the hours, but you're still just a real person.
Absolutely a real person. So I always tell people that I don't sit on any kind of throne of judgment, nor does it mean that I live a life of perfection. I'm just trying to practice what I preach and live the healthiest, most whole life I can and be as productive and contributing a member of society as I possibly can be.
Yeah. And that's what we need. We just need people to be real about where they are. And in this thing, because I think our title is The Effects of Trauma, in America and on our peace. And the first thing that I heard you say when we were at a women's event was you were talking about sexual assault.
Mhm.
You were talking about how it actually changes. Now, you correct me if I get the wording wrong, but changes our DNA, for lack of a better word. Is that right?
That's right. So, what we know about what they call the genetics of trauma is that trauma changes DNA 3 generations before us and 3 generations after us. So, our grandparents, our parents, our grandparents, and our great grandparents created the DNA that we have today. And so, that can include lots of things that happen to them that creates maybe anxiety in us or has changed our central nervous system so that we process all of life maybe completely differently than we would have if they had not experienced that trauma. And you've heard, I know, of generational trauma, and that is absolutely real. That, it's sort of biblical, that we've heard that the sins of the father visit upon their children as much as 7 generations. Well,
Yeah.
science has told us that it's definitely 6. And so it's not a real far stretch to imagine 7 generations. And so the same thing for us. Trauma that we experience influences our children and their children and their children. So it's very important. And two, like, I want to point this out. There's a great book that's just out. This is by Gabor Mate, who is a very famous psychologist and medical doctor. It's called The Myth of Normal. But it also talks about the impacts of trauma on the DNA that right now in our culture are causing a huge groundswell in autoimmune disorders and chronic illness.
Mm.
So, talk about tangible results of trauma, we're seeing it.
Yes, yes. And I believe that because, of course we say mental health and we just kind of throw that word around, but we don't really realize what we're talking about or how deep it goes. And it's not just the fact that, well, why don't somebody get help? Because sometimes they think they have gotten help or they may have talked about it, but they didn't go deep enough for it. What do you think about that?
Well, so what I think is, I think what's more normalized is someone says mental health and the conversation ends,
Mm.
because we think of mental health with all those really highly stigmatized words like crazy or insane or sick. And that is not true. Mental health is as much part of our health and as much a part of who we are as human beings as any other aspect. Exercise, physical health. If we have a headache, we don't think that it's a bad thing and we don't pathologize it, in just the same way we should not about mental issues because they're just a part of who we are as human beings.
And I'm so glad you said that because, I think about that all the time. Now, we'll go to the doctor if we got a cough or
Mhm.
something like that. If it doesn't go away in 7 days, we'll go back.
Absolutely.
Um, we'll try something else.
Mhm.
We'll try a different medication. If it's still not gone, we're going to go back. But something about when we say mental health or, just having the conversation about the things that are bothering you,
Mhm.
why is that so scary to people?
Well, so first of all, we are a nation of winners. We don't want to hear about anybody losing, and the heart of trauma is loss. And so sometimes the heart of mental illness is that everything's not perfect, and we want to all make sure like that we look like we have it all together and that everything is perfect. And it's really created kind of this silent conspiracy around anything difficult in life or any kind of loss that we might experience. And every single person, right? It's part of the human condition, will experience a loss. And some of those losses are cultural, right? That there's loss after loss after loss after loss. Some of them are just very human, like we may lose a loved one to death. There may be someone who is chronically ill who suffers a loss of a career or a loss of a marriage, or a miscarriage can cause the loss of a baby. And so, what we find a lot of times is that people want to be in denial about, oh my gosh, this, I shouldn't be hurting as much as I am. And so they kind of either shut it down, or maybe they even go to a friend or a loved one and say, hey, I'm really struggling. And that person says, well, maybe you should pray more, or maybe you should just hold it in, or don't air your dirty laundry in public, right? Like, don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Put on a happy face. And those don't work, they're not effective. And so, what we do is we wander around with all this stuff sort of broiling around inside of us, and it's making us sick.
And I'm just thinking about all the different, scenarios that I've been through, and people like, have faith. You got to have faith.
Mhm.
Like, I thought I had faith. I thought, I did pray about it. I wrote it down on that piece of paper when we were at that conference and I threw it in the fire, but for some reason it's still here. It's still bothering me. I can't get over it, you know. And sometimes I didn't even know what the it was,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
just like, I don't even know how to explain it. I just don't feel well. I don't feel right. What's going on? So I mean, I'm passionate about these conversations because I've done these conversations. I've been to those. I sat on the couch, I've sat in chairs, I've met in the parking lot, whatever I needed to do because I just, my life was not going anywhere and I wasn't happy and I didn't know how to fix it.
Right. Well, so trauma can keep us stuck at the age that we were when it happened. So if a child is sexually abused at when they're 3 or 4, if they never deal with that, if they're never provided trauma therapy that helps them to cope with feeling out of control or feeling like there's something wrong with them, right? Children never internalize it that there's something wrong with an adult. Children idolize adults and they look at adults as being godlike. And so if they're ever acted out against, whether it's sexual or physical or emotional or verbal abuse, that child internalizes that there must be something wrong with me, because there can't be something wrong with this beloved parent or grandparent or aunt or uncle or neighbor or whatever. And if those feelings are never honored or affirmed, that it's okay to feel that way, that you really were mistreated, and we're going to acknowledge that, then they get stuck at that age.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's really kind of an emotional freezing. And so it can cause a lot of problems. A lot of times I'll compare it with people to, like, we used to play with those cans of worms, or you'd see a comedian have them on TV, right? That when a problem happens, we kind of push it down in the can, and then something else happens and we push it down and we pretend like everything's okay, and we keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and trying to hold it all together, and then it all kind of erupts, and we wonder why we get depressed, we wonder why we have panic attacks, we wonder why we're angry, we wonder why we don't want to have relationships with people, or that we feel very anxious all the time. If we don't express these feelings, that can come from mistreatment, it can come from an actual traumatic event. We had a terrible car accident, or we saw something horribly traumatic that happened. If we don't process that, or we don't talk about it and deal with it, it always stays inside of us. And so it is not just miraculously like taken away, so I am a strong believer in faith and prayer and all of those things. In fact, I'm a Christian therapist. But that's akin to saying, well, we're not going to go to the doctor when we have cancer. We're going to pray that away. And again, I think prayer is an amazing thing, right? We're told that God is the great physician. Jesus can do things. He's the great counselor, right? But we also have like medical advances that we know can come alongside of that, right? That God has given us the knowledge and the research, the science for that, and that can make people well, right? It can save their lives. And it's the same thing with trauma or any kind of mental issue, right? That there are so many advances now that we can really mitigate people's suffering. But the first thing that we have to do is acknowledge that people actually do suffer.
Yes, amen. And and I know we were going to talk previously about like uh, minority
Mhm.
mental illness and things like that,
Mhm.
and and I just had so many thoughts about this, but it brought up one time when I was at work and one of the coworkers said I need a mental illness day, right? And so, and I was like, okay, that was cool and everything. But I think I said it like maybe 2 weeks later. And they were like, are you okay? You need to go to the doctor. And I was like,
Mhm.
no, I mean, I just need a day like that other person
Right,
needed a
right.
day.
So, like, that's a really good point, right? That we have to provide self-care for ourselves, and sometimes that means taking a break, right, and getting away from a stressful environment. And we don't do that particularly well either.
Mm-mm.
The book that I referred to earlier, by Dr. Mate, one of the things that he wrote in there that really resonated with me was that he was in a restaurant recently with another respected colleague, and there were TVs blaring, and the music was so loud, and everybody was on their cell phone. And he asked this other doctor that he was with, he said, "What is this all about?" And that other doctor said, "This is trauma. People are so distraught that they are afraid to be present in the moment because they're afraid of what might happen, or that their own trauma might come up, or that they might have to actually talk to someone and relate to them as a human being and honor and affirm their own suffering, their experience, right? We've become very polarized as a culture. And, I'm guilty of it too. I love to watch TikTok. I love to be on social media and Instagram and see what people are saying with what I can hear or learn. But that is very much of an escapist kind of behavior that really at its heart is not so different than people who consume alcohol or take drugs,
Yeah.
or use pornography or spend compulsively or gamble compulsively. It's very much about escapism, and what we're escaping is the pain of the present moment. And that's scary that so many people are so shut down. I mean, and I think we see it in public now, right? That people drive and there's so much road rage, or people just explode at the grocery store over the smallest little thing. It's again because we're like holding everything together, just as tightly as we can, and never like expressing how we really feel about anything, or feeling hurt, or we have had legitimate losses. Some people have had losses, again, to talk about, when we were originally going to talk, which was National Minority Mental Health Awareness Day, right? These repetitive kinds of injuries, right? Police brutality, discrimination, racism, the hatred that we hear so spouted out everywhere, it seems like, in our country nowadays, right? That just does not go away, right? That can stay with people and really cause issues generationally for a very, very long time. When we don't acknowledge homelessness and the suffering that has caused that, or that causes, right? Or
Right.
addiction, or the loss of relationships. Sometimes people, as they age, right, they have functional loss of their bodies. Maybe they're not able to be as active as they once were, and they don't feel honored in their communities, right? That we as human beings, there's a Maslow's hierarchy of human need, right? We need shelter, we need food, we need clothing to wear when it's cold outside, we need safety. Those are the very basic needs. Well, how many people don't even have those basic needs, right? And then on top of that, we need to feel like we have self determination, that we can go to school, or we can get a career, and that we can work in that career for a long time and be well respected. Again, let's think about how many people don't have that, or don't even have the possibility of that. And
Right.
start seeing like, wow, this is really widespread. And so the beginning of it, yes, we say trauma, and maybe we think of that as sexual assault or sexual abuse, or some horrible event like the earthquake in Morocco that happened yesterday. But it's so much more widespread than that. It is a pandemic of its own, and it's been going on for generations.
Wow. I mean, this conversation could just go on and on. I mean, you touched on so many different areas.
Mhm.
And again, and even like social media, and I was going to ask you that, it is escapism. I've done it.
Mhm.
I've had something that I needed to do and I just didn't want to do it. I didn't feel, so I was
Sure.
like, I'll
I
get
mean,
on
streaming
Facebook.
services on TV, video games. I mean, you think about it, right? I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day, about children, and children, when I grew up, my mother would tell me to go play outside. And so I would get on my bike, or I would go dig in the dirt, or, I'd find some friend in the neighborhood to play with. Now children are so highly scheduled and their lives are so regimented that there's not any of that downtime. And so that downtime is kind of when we catch our breath, or we go, huh, I don't really like all these activities that I'm doing. I kind of feel like a hamster on a wheel, and it's good to be able to have rest. I mean, we have a Sabbath, so we're given 24 hours in a week, but so many people, even Christian people, don't take a rest. Because again, if I'm laying on the couch and I'm not doing anything, I might start thinking about, how am I treating my husband or wife? How am I interacting with my siblings and family? Maybe I didn't handle that the best possible way. Well, a lot of people really don't even want to think about that. And
And
that's not so healthy.
it's not, it's not. And even with being on the couch and you think you're relaxing, but you're constantly in your mind saying, well, I really should go wash these dishes. I could just start the load of clothes and then, I could run down the street to the grocery that's not resting. You might have been laying there, but you are not at rest.
Well, that's right, because you're torturing yourself, right? And so a lot of things that I'll tell people is that if shame or guilt comes into something, that's not healthy, right? So when you rest, if you feel like you have other things to do, then take a nap for 15 minutes, but give yourself permission to do nothing for that period of time. And don't be in your head, with that really negative, critical self-talk, because then you're just robbing yourself.
Exactly. And I just don't think we realize that we're doing it, and then after a while it just becomes like that normal thing. you
Right. And that normal thing can be very abusive, right? So it's bad enough when other people abuse and traumatize us, but when it becomes our internal voice and that's what we're telling ourselves, there's no escape to that.
Right.
So again, we wonder why people are so stressed out or so needing, mental health meds to feel better. There are a lot of people who are depressed and a lot of people who are anxious, and they don't know why.
I
There's
don't know why.
there's
Yeah.
usually a cause.
And they need medicine to get up, but then they need medicine to calm them down at night and send them to bed. And so but I think when you find yourself in those positions, you should stop and be like, okay, wait a minute.
We
This
should,
is
but we don't.
this is not, well, I hope somebody listening today says, oh, wait, this is not how life should run.
So, unfortunately, sometimes this starts before we're ever even born. So, our moms are pregnant with us, and from the time she knows she's pregnant, if that's difficult for her, right? It
Mhm.
could be financial. It could be that she has, in my situation, my mother had 3 older children, and I was not expected. And that's those kind of surprises, right? Those kinds of complications, because not every pregnancy is, oh, this is perfect and that the baby is going to come into a perfect environment, right? Well, from the time that mother starts experiencing, and maybe she was already having, financial difficulty or housing insecurity, or who knows, whatever other domestic violence or a difficult marriage, or her spouse was cheating or whatever, maybe she had an addiction. Well, from the time that that child starts gestating inside of her, her hormones and her stress, like all the cortisol, all the norepinephrine, all of those hormones are going directly to that baby through the placental wall from the time its central nervous system, principally its brain, are being formed.
Wow.
And so for a lot of us, we've never known anything but that feeling of, why am I so stressed out?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so too, in our culture, like it's become a really popular thing to say if someone has an unwanted pregnancy, well, we'll just put the baby up for adoption. Well, what people don't understand is that children who are born and then adopted away, those children have the most high, so the highest of all populations, of the potential for addiction, the potential for trauma,
Hmm.
because again, their brain chemistry the whole time, their mother's thinking for that whole, however long,
Yeah.
7, 6, 5, however many months that she knows she's going to give that baby up, and having to deal with the emotional harrowing nature of that, right? And that's transmitted directly to her baby, and it's developing central nervous system.
Wow.
Yeah.
I often tell people, I mean, we say it, we hear people say it all the time. You act just like your daddy. You act like your mama. You do this like you know what I'm saying? And sometimes, especially when it's been a tumultuous relationship, I'm like, well, maybe we shouldn't say that because they know how you feel about their mom or their dad or their sister or
Mhm.
whatever. So maybe we shouldn't say that. But I mean, it's going even deeper.
Oh, it goes very deeply. And two, the thing about saying you act just like your mom, sometimes that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If we tell someone something often enough, then they start to believe it and they
Mhm.
start living that way. So that really is the foundation of what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. What you believe becomes what you think, becomes how you live.
Say that again.
What you believe or what you think becomes what you believe, becomes how you live.
Mm.
So cognitive, the way we're thinking, behavioral, our thoughts influencing our behavior, and then the therapy is looking at how all of that has come to be.
Wow. So, I mean, all of this, people who maybe want to start businesses, but they're scared, people who want to write books. I mean, people have so many goals and dreams, but they just go to work every day, day to day, but they don't live out their full vision or purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's some of that, right? They're scared, they don't know, they haven't seen success.
Sure.
So,
Or they've been told that they're not worthy of it, right? Or
yeah.
they don't believe that they are.
Who
Yeah.
are you? You're not going to make it. You know how many people write books? You know how many people play football?
Yeah.
Don't do
Well,
that.
and to think about how that plays out in our culture in not such positive ways, right? And it's really very limiting. So one of the principal parts about therapy is that our number one ethical concern is to do no harm. But also, we are never to inject our personal beliefs on someone. Now, if somebody comes to me and they say, "Hey, Roberto, we're Christians, so we'd like to kind of have you incorporate scripture in the therapy, whatever." And so that's perfectly fine for them to ask. It would be completely wrong for me just to do that, to impose my personal beliefs, my religious beliefs in that session on someone who may not think the same way. And so the same is true with anything else, right? That I have to honor who that person is. And my number one goal is to help them live into the fullness of who they are created to be. That's not me for me to tell them. We might explore what that looks like, or what do you think about that, but that is never a therapist's place to tell. And so sometimes I have some really close psychotherapy colleagues. We're a pretty tight-knit group, and we talk about sometimes clients that we get who have seen other people either saying they're therapists or life coaches or whatever, who are really doing a lot of harm. And so I would really encourage people who come to a therapist or go to anyone, you need to ask, like, what are your credentials? What's your experience? Interview them like you would anybody else. You're not going to just let somebody come and put a new roof on your house. Well, your life, your brain, the way that you think and feel is way more important than that, even because it's your well being. And so people should really check out, who am I allowing to talk to me, or my child, or other family members, because it's really important that you want to kind of find out, tell me about your life experience. Tell me what you do in therapy and how you do it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely ask those questions.
No. People will go and they think, oh, this person knows what they're doing, and they just will take whatever they say. And sometimes that's really unhealthy.
Mm, mm, mm.
And so you have people traumatized who are trying to get help for trauma, right? Re traumatization.
Right, re-traumatize. Yeah, exactly. And we say it all the time too. You are your best advocate, like as far as your doctor goes. So
Mm-hmm.
ask questions. So it's the same thing. I think any person you allow in your life, whether it's a business partner, whether it's counselor, whatever, you have to ask those questions
A lot
because,
of questions.
whoo,
Yeah.
listen,
Yeah. And,
you're
and
already going through enough.
it's okay if a therapist says, hey, I don't know, that's not my area of specialty. I can give you a list of names of other people who are, but you kind of got to check out who you're allowing, right, to meddle in your life.
Yeah. Wow. It's so much. And I keep thinking about the children, I mean, oh my gosh, we are their foundation. Like you said, they're looking up to us. And so, Lord, if we're not on a firm foundation, and it's okay that we have issues. I definitely want to say that. It's okay that you're not okay some days.
Everyone has issues.
Yeah,
Everyone.
it, that part. That part. And so just be okay with dealing with that. Be okay with being open with it. And if it takes you a while to find the therapist or the counselor that fits you, it's okay to keep going.
Mhm.
You don't have to feel like you're stuck. Um,
Absolutely.
and I
what
say,
what we say is that we do the best we can until we learn to do better.
yeah,
And sometimes we're all on a different journey.
yeah, yeah. And there's so many different aspects of therapy that you can go. And sometimes sometimes you need that psychotherapist to just kind of get the ball rolling. Sometimes then you might need a life coach that says, okay,
Absolutely.
let's take your business this way. Sometimes you need multiple coaches and counselors, and that is really okay.
Mhm.
We have multiple types of friends.
Absolutely.
We
That's
have friends
absolutely
that
right.
like to go shopping. So, like my friends know, if you want to go shopping, don't call me. Call our other friends because I don't want to go shopping.
Well, to speak to that, so it's like that for us therapists too. So 4 days a week, I do trauma therapy. So sexual assault, sexual abuse, really dysfunctional relationships, difficult life transitions, all that really heavy stuff. But then
Mhm.
1 day a week, one of my psychotherapist colleagues, she and I have started another business that is professional business coaching for female executives.
Oh,
Because
cool.
that's a whole different aspect, right? Of how do I balance my work and my life? When do I have children? How do I juggle having children? What about my husband's not helping with the stuff at home? So an entirely different kind of therapy, right? And a whole different, but it's nice, right? Because that flexes different muscles that Aaron and
Mhm.
I have, right? That are different than dealing with really heavy, difficult, painful things all week. So,
Yeah.
so
So
we honor that.
what do you do for yourself? Because I don't know that I mean, I tend to take on when people are having issues and stuff, I feel like it's my issue, sometimes. So how in the world do you do this 4 times a week for multiple people and they're in different levels of their therapy?
Well, so self-care, 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 right? We cannot preach that which we do not practice. So sometimes we have to go to a therapist, because sometimes we get triggered by the things that our clients are telling us, our own wounds.
Yeah.
So that's a component of it. I exercise 4 days a week. I get up at 5:15 and I go and do Pilates on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and early Sunday morning. And I love that. Sometimes I will go read something that's completely not psychotherapy related. I have
Mhm.
a lot of friends. I love music. I like to do art. Sometimes I want to be completely not thinking about anything. And I like really big jigsaw puzzles, because all you're thinking about is trying to find those little minute
Right.
that fit, and you can't really think about anything else. And so sometimes that's okay too. And rest. I have to have really good sleep. I have to eat really well and just take care of myself, spend time with my family, people that I love, and that's very enriching. And so sometimes we get so where we're racing around and doing all these things and we tell ourselves, I have to, I need to, I should, I must. No, we can say,
Mhm.
I can't, or no, no, thank you. And no is not an ugly or bad word, even at church, right? Sometimes we have to protect our boundaries.
Yes. Amen. Speak about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's okay. I mean, again, like if you're going to talk about who set examples, Jesus would go and have meals with his friends, right? His disciples. He would go into the garden by himself and pray. He would get in a boat to get away from people, and just be out in the peaceful waters, right? It wasn't always peaceful. But, he had to do the things that were enriching to him. And so
Right.
that's a really good example for us that these are things we should do. Take the Sabbath, and if your Sabbath is not on Sunday, make it another day.
Exactly. Make it another day.
Mhm.
And even with work and different things, we know people are working 24/7, but you have got to find some time that's for you.
Mhm.
You've got to be able to refuel yourself, refresh, and it's okay because trust me, everything that you're leaving behind for those 2 hours or those 24 hours, they're going to be there waiting for you when you get back.
Absolutely. That's right.
And we think that the world is going to collapse if we go away for
Mhm.
24 hours. But what if I die? And, I mean, even with me now, I'm in kind of a transition where, one of my parents has some mobility issues.
Mhm.
And so then I try to be there for the other parent to give her a break, And so, but I'm having to find a new norm in all of that.
Well, and there's juggling, right, to figure out like what's healthy for me. And so, sometimes a component in that can be whether it's exercise or just quiet or actually go into therapy, right? Because a lot of times, so it's like this denial that we have in our culture. And I don't know how, if you find this interesting today in particular, right? That we talk about 9/11 and they'll show the videos today and they'll show the memorial, but we very much limit it, right? And you'll hear people say, I don't want to watch it, I don't want to think about it, because it's so painful. But
Right.
just because we don't think about it doesn't mean that people
Yeah.
aren't still dealing with it, right? I read an article in the New York Times this weekend that just last week, using advanced DNA research, that they were able to identify the remains, and they're like tiny microscopic pieces of these people who
Wow.
died on 9/11, and their families have not been able to have the closure of having their loved one back, to have an actual funeral, to actually have remains from that. And so here we are 22 years later, and that's still going on, right? And we don't even think about that, most of us, because
Hmm.
our lives have moved on. Or we can compartmentalize it and say, okay, well, we'll think about it when we go to visit New York, and we'll go to the 9/11 memorial or on 9/11, but otherwise we don't want to think about it.
Right. Right. That is so true. And I mean, it's like that with so many things that are happening in
Mm-hmm.
the culture on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't want to hear about it, you know. Okay, but it's really happening to somebody's really experiencing this trauma, somebody's really going through this, somebody really doesn't know what to do because they don't know where to turn.
I think that's a really good point that you make. And so I think that this desensitization, right, and the shutting down, the denial of it, it prevents us from being fully human. That we can't think about what is someone else's experience of this and what is their pain. And if we can't do that, then we can't kind of share their burden. And then we don't have to think about it, right? And that's very neat and easy, but it's not what real life is. And we become very shut down and very isolated, very standoffish from other people, and it's just not healthy.
Right. It's really not. And sometimes sometimes, the people that want to talk about it, they're not really looking for an answer from you. They're just wanting to get it out of them.
Mhm.
They're just wanting to make sure that you understand,
Mhm.
what's going
Yep.
on.
I mean, I
So,
have a lot. I have a lot of people who have a lot of dissension in their families, whether it's related to politics or race or political candidates or what religion,
yeah,
and they can talk about it with their family members. So they can come and talk to a therapist and get it out. And, that externalization, all the research that we have about psychotherapy is the talk therapy is so beneficial just because it enables people to feel heard and validated. And it's very cathartic, right? That you're kind of like laying all of that burden off on someone else. And yes, we have to deal with that, right? But that's the role of a therapist, right? Is that we're a container, and people pour into us all of this pain and heartache and difficulty and confusion, and then we have to deal with it, right? So we'll deal with it, but that's our job. And
right.
so sometimes that's really helpful for people because they have nowhere else to go. I can remember when I was working for the Children's Advocacy Center in Lincolnton a long time ago. And I had a little girl who had been the victim of sexual abuse. And she was about 11 years old, and she cried to me and said, this has not happened to anyone else who's my age. And at that time, I probably had about 8 other girls that were at her middle school. And I was able to say to her, you're not alone. There are 8 other little girls who come to me for therapy who had, if not the exact same thing happen, something very similar. And so you're not alone, and you're not the only one who's experienced that. And that really changed everything for her to feel like, wow, that she had not been singled out, that there was not something wrong with her, that this was kind of a societal problem, but it so helped alleviate all of that guilt and shame that she was feeling, that, oh my gosh, it's only me. And that's, I mean, I think as humans, we want to know that, right? That other people suffer too. And it's not that we want people to suffer, but that, we can help carry each other's burdens and encourage each other along the way, and journey alongside. Sometimes there's not anything a therapist can say to instantly make things better, right? Sometimes I'll joke around and I'll ask a client, what would you do if I gave you a magic wand? What would you change, right? And so they'll say the thing, and then we'll kind of laugh, and I'll say, well, that I don't have the ability to do that. But let's think about what we do have the power to change. How could we make this situation better for you? And sometimes it's just like knowing somebody cares.
Right. And that's major because, like you were saying, we're so busy in life and we're going from one event or function to another. And sometimes even with church, I would think, okay, we we've been in church for like 4 hours. We had this big event, but we didn't really get time to fellowship.
Mhm.
We went from one service, everybody tried to eat real quick, and we went to another service, and now everybody's tired, ready to go home. But
Mhm.
wouldn't it have been nice if we could have just like had the afternoon just to chill, just to play some games with one another? You know what I'm saying?
Well, and I think that's why people really got to like the stay at home during COVID, right? Is because we had the opportunity to sleep a little later than what we normally would because we don't have to commute to an office,
Yeah,
or we actually got to see our children grow up in front of us or have dinner as a family,
yeah,
And so, like, there are a lot of people, return to office right now is very traumatic for people having to be in the office as much as they are, because they got a taste of what does it look like if I slow my life down a little bit, and then
exactly.
we can kind of make those choices about, how do I have a better work life balance? And so it's not so traumatic that I'm not so away from my family all the time, because trauma is different for every person. And we have little traumas and we have gigantic traumas, right? But we all have some. We've all had these losses, again, whether it's a loved one who's died, some cataclysmic accident or natural disaster, right? And if we look at the news or we look about the things that are happening, right, they're happening all around us.
Yep.
And again, we become very tunnel vision, like, well, it's not happening to me. So, I guess the world is okay. And that's really not a good perspective. It's like you see that meme on Facebook all the time, right? And it says, you don't have any idea what someone else's burden or problem is. So always be kind. I think that that's probably a really good rule, because there are so many people and we look at everybody as being, oh, well, they look the same as me. So, everything must be okay. Um, and we see this with white privilege, about people saying, oh, well, I had to work hard, I had to do this. Not the same thing, and it's the willingness to try to step into someone else's shoes and say, their experience is different than mine because we're not all the same people. And we can be stronger and better if we try to be more empathic and loving and kind, right? And to really see what someone else has gone through or is going through.
That is so true. I mean, goodness gracious. I don't know. I ask my friends all the time, when did we get to the place where if we don't agree on everything, then we can't be friends.
But see, that's easier, right? Then you don't have to compromise. You don't have to still be present and loving. You can just cut somebody off.
That's crazy. Sorry, I don't know if I was supposed to say. Listen, but you're cutting off so many cool people. I mean, that's just one aspect of what they think about or what they've dealt with. I
Mhm.
mean, and
Well,
for
remember
me,
22 years ago when 9/11 had happened, and that night all of Congress got out on the steps, right, of the of in Washington D.C., and they all sang America together, right, and they were all like holding on to each other, and I said that today on a social media post that I made. I said, 22 years ago we were so united, if only we could remember the brotherhood that is spoken of in that song and be closer to that again. I mean, we've come a really far way away from that in 22 years, and we really need to move back to, again, that looking out for one another and being kind to our neighbor and showing loving kindness, and even just giving people the benefit of the doubt, because so many people are suffering in ways that we have no idea about. There are many, many people who were abused as children or were assaulted sexually as adults or have had catastrophic relationships or financial problems or health issues, and we don't know, and we judge a lot, and we don't have any idea. So it's sometimes it's just all the time, if we could just be kind.
let's start there. Wow. And I'm just thinking about, how different it is when you run into somebody and they smile and they speak to you,
Hmm.
and when you run into somebody and they're just like, get out the way, or they just say something smart, and you're like,
Hmm.
the world just happened right here. I mean, I'm coming through this door. I have the right to come through this door just like you do.
Absolutely.
And it just makes your day different. You can either take it, and then some people, it then triggers them onto that next level of
Hmm.
decline for that day, or how they feel about people. Well, why did he open the door for this person, but then he didn't open it for me? I mean, you really don't know the thoughts that are going on in people's minds.
Well, and you see it kind of bubbling out all over the place, right? You see it driving, you see it on social media, you see it in stores, where people, they'll just snap, right? And they'll say horrible, it's like all this lava coming out of their mouth, right? that speaks really to this mental fragility that's going on, that people have so much that's happening and they're not dealing with it. And, the not dealing with it just makes it worse. So
Mhm.
it's like a wound, I'll talk about that in therapy a lot, is that if you have a wound, someone who's diabetic really understands this. An ingrown toenail for a person who doesn't have diabetes is just an ingrown toenail. But for someone with diabetes, that could mean their foot or their leg, right? That they could have to have it amputated because that infection takes hold so quickly, right?
Right.
And so when that happens, the doctor has to really clean out all the infection, right? To make sure that that wound is going to heal. Well, psychologically, mentally, that's the same thing. If we have these wounds and we don't clean them out and deal with them, get rid of that trauma, and it can get so much better. Um, then we're just going to get worse, right? Or we just stay stuck in the same place.
Yeah.
And that's not good. It's not good for us. It's not good for our families. It's not good for society.
Right.
And we're seeing, again, COVID was one kind of pandemic. This new mental health crisis that we're seeing is a whole different kind of pandemic. We see it in children, right? Especially teenagers now who've had to go back to regular school after they were being homeschooled for so long. And there's all the social pressures, of being in person and having to be, dressed and presentable. And it's a lot.
It is a lot. It really is. When you really think about that.
Hmm.
Whew.
Well, and two, their COVID is kind of on the rise again because it's fall, and people, kids are back in school and people are gathering together inside places. And so, COVID numbers are up in the hospitals. And, so you have a whole other population that's completely triggered because they were the medical providers during COVID and saw so many people die and suffer. And now they're getting triggered all over the place because they didn't really resolve that trauma from back then.
Mm. Wow. Whew. Let's
Yeah.
be kind to one another.
And let's deal with our trauma.
Yes, yes. I mean, please, please, please. I say it all the time. Please do not be ashamed of wherever you are, the decisions you made. We have all made decisions that were
That's right.
didn't turn out well,
That's
you
right.
know.
That's right.
But as long as you keep letting that eat at you
Mhm.
and drive you to be bitter, to
Mhm.
be angry, I mean, it's just not productive for you even,
Mhm. No,
And
no. So even like bitterness, we're angry at someone else. Well, that's a poison to us, right? It's a poison we intend for someone else, but that we wind up drinking, and it makes us sick.
yep,
And we don't even have the clarity of thought to see what that's doing to us, right? That hatred, that jealousy, whatever it is,
yeah,
that it will make, and it is making people very, very sick. All of this unresolved mental health stuff is causing, again, this autoimmune disorder rise, chronic illness, which looks like cancer, diabetes, lots of things.
yeah, and just that chronic fatigue, that chronic
Mhm.
pain, and you just don't even know why you have the pain.
Absolutely.
Is the trauma that's inside
And it
your
stays
body.
in, right? So it's like that can of worms, right? We keep it like held down. We're not going to deal with it. Well, it starts coming out in high blood pressure, or coming out in like eczema or
I was gonna say,
insomnia, right?
yep,
Inflammation in the body. And so, again, that book I'm just on that book, but he really talks about how inflammation in the body is tied to depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and then all of your other autoimmune disorders, celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, and on and on and on. Well, they can't find a link as to why this is happening. I think we know why it's happening.
right, yeah. I mean, just think about it. All your organs and the different things are inflamed. They're not pumping,
Hmm.
oxygen. The red blood cells and things are not moving like they should. It's so much. And, people talk a lot about now about like brain fog.
Hmm.
And it's, that inflammation in your brain and things that are swelling up and is causing you. And then, we self diagnose ourselves. And so, but sometimes it's time for us to really allow ourselves to live. and to live well. It's
Yeah. Grieve our losses, right? And whether that loss is a death.
yeah,
In America, we like to sanitize death and make it look pretty. We have flowers, and we have the pretty casket and all of those things. Well, death is death, and death is as much a part of life as living. But we think that after the funeral, the family members of that person who has died, they should just be back to normal and get over it. That's not
right,
healthy. That's not normal. People have to feel what they feel for a period of time. Their life will never be the same without that person.
right,
And so it's kind of this process that will last the remainder of their life, and normalizing that is good and healthy, right? Because shutting it down and not showing it, or snuffling back our tears, right? I mean, like what we teach children, I'll give you something to cry about. No, crying is natural. We are the only mammals who have tear ducts who cry when we feel emotional. And
mhm,
then when we cry, our body emits endorphins that make us feel calmer and better. So there's actually like a physiological intention for that. And so stopping it is not good for us.
right, exactly. Cry.
Mhm. Yeah. Feel what you feel. Think about it. How do I really feel? A lot of people feel really numb or really angry.
Yeah,
Angry has been normalized that that's powerful, right? Like it's not a weak emotion. All emotion is equally valid. We just have to determine which one we're feeling. And again, a lot of us have no idea.
right, right. Yeah, I'm telling you, I felt a lot of these things we're talking about. I felt that just void. I didn't have a care either way.
Mhm.
Wasn't happy, wasn't sad. I just
Indifferent.
yeah,
Mhm.
indifferent.
Well, and
Exactly.
think about how you are when you're numb and shut down and indifferent to someone else's suffering, right? I don't care, right? It's
Right,
a good place for society to be.
right, right. No, no,
Mhm.
no. Lord, we got so much work to do. What do we do?
Start attending to ourselves, right? Taking care of ourselves and listening to how we feel and what we think and what we need. So that's like a question that I always ask people. What do I want? What do I need? How am I going to get it?
Mm, listen, y'all ask yourself these questions, okay? I listen. I want this to go on. I just want to tell Alan, keep rolling, because I mean, we're really only just touching the surface,
Mhm.
really, you know. But we hope that something you've heard, just empowers you to be like, you know what, I'm worth the healing. I'm worth the time it takes for me to figure out what's causing me this pain, you
Absolutely.
know? And so, again, and that's what I don't like too about when people are getting older. They just be like, well, they're getting older. No, no, don't tell me that.
Mhm.
They are getting older, but not everybody who's old feels this way.
Absolutely.
So
Well, and
let's
that's a
get to
really
the
good
bottom
thing
of
too, because
this.
that's a loss, right? So aging can also be very traumatic. I've lost my independence. I can't take care of myself. I can't drive. Maybe I'm physically not able to do the things that I once was. Maybe my children don't respect me, or they think that my cognitive abilities have declined. Maybe I don't even have my own money anymore. Maybe I'm not able to live in my own home. There's a lot of loss with that, a lot of times we younger people just sort of like bulldoze over and trying to get done the things that we have to do, and there's a lot of trauma there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's people who are caregivers who are going through, and you're like, I had to stop my life to be a caregiver. I love this person,
Mhm.
but there's so much more I want to do. And
Absolutely.
I don't know if I'll be able to get back to it, when I'll be able to get back to it. It's
Mhm.
a lot that people deal with.
But see, even talking about that maybe there's the possibility of someone sharing your burden. Hey,
Mhm.
I take
Yeah.
care of my parents too. Maybe I could watch yours for a weekend and you could get away and then you could come check in on mine.
Yeah.
But if we don't share that, right? And again, everyone trying to, like, I don't know what we're trying to be, like the Kardashians or something, that we're
Superheroes.
fabulous, perfect lives, right? That we can help each other, but we can't help each other if we don't understand, what burdens we're each bearing.
That is a very, very good point. Wow. Just telling it, you never know who's
Hmm.
gonna show up.
Hmm.
Listen, okay, I gotta do these quick commercials. So we're gonna be going for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. But we'll be back. I want you to tell everybody how they can follow you, um, or give them your website, all that kind of stuff. And then just leave us with whatever your last words are, whether it's a piece of advice or a couple of steps, just whatever you'd like to end the session with.
Happy
So
to.
we'll be right back.
It's your girl, Latoya Toya brand. I'm here to introduce my holistic company, Sea of Things, located in Atlanta, Georgia. We sell sea moss gel, seaweed, dry herbs, and all natural fruit juices. We can be reached online at seaofthings.square.site. We also ship nationwide. We can be reached on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter under Sea of Things.
So the first commercial was from Hope for All of Charlotte, and as you can see, they tend to the founder's birthday is July 4th, so he always has a community cookout for his birthday to give back to the community. But they do health screenings, they give away hygiene packets. Right now, they're taking donations for insulated cups so that the homeless can have it. So whatever season they're in, if they need their drink to stay hot or to stay cold. So they're doing donations for that now. So, but they are very much in the community, and the founder is also a nurse, and so he's very proactive about even if you're homeless, to try to be as healthy as you can. And so with Sia Things, that organization is based out of Atlanta. And when she was on the show, she talked a lot too about inflammation in the body and the different effects that it has. And so she has multiple products that can help you. I am not vegan. I don't tell anybody what to do, but I just say if you can incorporate some, healthier things into your lifestyle, take it one day at a time, one product at a time, just so you can feel better about life and have more clarity and be able to function better. So we have been talking to Roberta Wilson, and listen, I thank you so much because you always say yes. You always show up and you bring so much information and wealth that is pertinent to living a healthy life, a godly life, and to really think about things. So I appreciate you coming on the show. You're welcome anytime. So truly, if you've got an event or something, or you say, I'm feeling in this season we need to talk about this, just let me know because I'm here for that.
Love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
People to remember to attend to themselves, self care, listen to your body and be realistic about how much you're doing, where you're going, who you're hanging out with. Does that feel good to you? What does your body need? What do you need mentally? What do you need physically? There's a fantastic book. It's called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And it is amazing. Talks about the effects of trauma that stay with a person until they actually deal with it and get rid of it.
Mm.
That's very good. You all can follow me on Facebook at Grace Christian Counseling. I also have another page called Women of Grace. I have some events for Women of Grace. It is an affirming group for women of all ages. We meet in Belmont and Charlotte once a month for dinner and once a month for brunch. And I offer a program that's a little psychology, a little just good self care, and a little encouragement. And my website is gracecounselingcharlotte.com, and you can reach me at roberta.gracecc@gmail.com. So
Awesome.
thank you for having me. Y'all take care of yourselves.
Yes, do that, do that. And so I'll definitely get the links for your groups and we'll add them to the description of the video.
Awesome.
So thank you again for coming. Listen, y'all, we are making connections with Aly. Cause listen, we want you to make the biggest connection, which is to yourself and to be self-aware and to know that you are worthy of healing. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of peace. And so, let's deal with these traumas. Let's deal with the things that are causing us to lack in those other areas. So we are here every Saturday at 12 noon and every Monday at 2 p.m. Catch our replays this Thursdays at 7 p.m. This month is Insurance Awareness Month. So we have some business partners that are going to be bringing some good information about that. So definitely catch those replays on Thursdays at 7. And listen, thank you again, Roberta. I appreciate it.
Bye, y'all.
Until next time, as always, we're leaving you with love, positivity, and good vibes. Have a great day, everybody.
You too. Bye.